All right, let's do it. Let's dive deep into Dostoevsky's notes from Underground.
Oh, yeah. I love this one.
You provided the novel itself, some critical essays, and even some of Dostoevsky's letters. This is going to be a serious deep dive.
Yeah, this is going to be intense.
We're really going to try to unravel the psychology of this infamous underground man. He's a character brimming with contradictions.
Yeah, it's like we're going to dissect a brain that's wired for both brilliance and self-destruction.
Right.
And what makes this even more intriguing is that Dostoevsky doesn't shy away from those uncomfortable questions that we often avoid.
Exactly. This isn't a light beach read.
No.
This is a deep dive into the murky depths of the human condition.
Oh, yeah.
Think of it this way. Have you ever felt stuck in your own head? Like overthinking everything, even sabotaging your own happiness?
Oh, for sure.
Well, that's the underground man's default mode.
Yeah, and he's acutely aware of it.
Right.
He even calls himself a sick man, a spiteful man, a ridiculous man. He's intelligent, but that intelligence seems to fuel his self-loathing.
Right.
Rather than any sense of fulfillment.
Yeah, it's like he's his own worst enemy.
Absolutely.
He craves connection, but pushes everyone away.
Right.
He analyzes everything to death.
Yeah.
Finding fault with himself and everyone around him.
Oh.
Case in point. The infamous anecdote about the officer in the tavern.
Yes. This seemingly minor incident becomes a festering wound for the underground man. He obsesses over it for years, fantasizing about revenge. But ultimately, he's too paralyzed by his own self-consciousness to act.
Right.
It's really interesting.
It's a perfect illustration of his paradoxical nature.
Oh, yeah.
He wants to be strong and assertive,
Right.
but he's crippled by his own insecurities.
Uh-huh.
He's so afraid of judgment that he avoids any real meaningful interaction.
Right. And this fear of judgment pushes him into a world of fantasy where he can escape the reality of his life.
Escape reality.
Yeah, and become the hero of his own internal narrative. He daydreams about love, about beauty, about a life of the sublime and the beautiful, as he puts it.
But even in his fantasies, there's a sense of self-awareness, almost a bitterness.
Yeah.
He recognizes that these are just golden dreams,
Right.
and yet he clings to them because they offer a temporary escape from the bleakness of his existence.
What's tragic is that these fantasies, while offering a momentary reprieve, actually deepen his feelings of inadequacy.
Right.
He constantly compares himself to these idealized versions of himself.
Right.
And inevitably falls short.
So he's trapped in this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
He feels inadequate in real life,
Mhm.
escapes into fantasy,
Yeah.
which then makes him feel even more inadequate.
Right.
It's like he's digging his own psychological grave.
And then we come to this disastrous dinner party episode, which really throws all his insecurities and contradictions into sharp relief.
Right. He decides to crash this farewell dinner for his former classmate Zverkov, driven by this desperate need to prove himself,
Yeah.
to impress people who frankly don't even care about him.
And this need for validation stems from that deep-seated feeling of inferiority we were talking about? Yeah.
He wants to be seen as witty, intelligent, successful,
Right.
but he ends up coming across as awkward, desperate, and, well, a bit pathetic.
The whole scene is cringeworthy.
Oh, yeah.
He spills wine, makes inappropriate jokes, and even manages to get a giant yellow stain on his trousers.
Oh, my gosh.
Talk about a metaphor for his inner turmoil.
Dostoevsky really lays bare the underground man's self-sabotaging tendencies in this scene. He's hyper-aware of his every social misstep, yet he seems almost willfully determined to make things worse. His internal monologue during this whole fiasco is just agonizing.
It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion.
Yeah.
You know it's going to be bad, but you can't tear your eyes away.
You can't.
And just when you think it can't possibly get any more awkward,
Oh, no.
enters Liza.
Liza is this young woman the underground man encounters in a brothel.
Yeah.
Initially, he positions himself as a savior,
Oh, wow.
wanting to rescue her from this life of prostitution.
Okay.
He paints a picture of love, freedom, and purpose, but something feels off about his motives. Yeah, it's almost like he's trying to save her, to compensate for his own feelings of inadequacy.
Exactly.
Wants to feel morally superior, to
Yeah.
have power over someone, anyone,
Yeah.
even if it's a woman trapped in a desperate situation.
And this power dynamic is central to understanding their relationship. He delivers these impassioned speeches about her finding a better life, but there's this underlying sense of manipulation, of wanting to control her narrative.
And it all comes crashing down in his brutal confession to her later on.
Oh, yeah.
He admits that his intentions were never pure,
Right.
that he was using her to feel powerful, to somehow avenge his own humiliations.
This confession is a turning point in the story. He lays bare his cruelty, his spite, his inability to connect with another human being on a genuine level. It's a moment of raw honesty, but it's also deeply unsettling.
It's heartbreaking to witness. Liza, who initially seems receptive to his advances, is left utterly devastated by his confession. She doesn't react with anger or outrage, but with the quiet dignity that exposes his pettiness even further.
Right.
Like, how
Yeah.
dare he?
And then there's that symbolic moment with the 5-ruble note.
Right.
He throws the money at her as a final act of degradation, almost as if he's trying to buy her forgiveness. But she leaves it on the table, refusing to be reduced to a transaction.
Wow. It's a powerful act of defiance.
Absolutely.
She rejects his attempt to control her, to define her worth. In that single gesture, she reclaims her agency and leaves him with nothing but his own shame.
This encounter with Liza pushes the underground man even deeper into his self-loathing. He recognizes that he's driven away the one person who might have offered him genuine connection, but he's trapped in this cycle of self-sabotage.
He even tries to rationalize his behavior,
Right.
arguing that suffering is the only authentic experience, the only proof of free will. He claims that happiness is for the ordinary, the ill-bred. Like, wow, that's a truly twisted perspective.
But that's Dostoevsky's genius, isn't it? He forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about human nature, to see how our own minds can become our prisons. We may not like the underground man, but his insights are undeniable.
He holds up a mirror to our own tendencies towards self-deception, our fear of vulnerability, our need to control and dominate. He even suggests that we're all divorced from life in some way, preferring the safety of ideas to the messiness of real experience.
That's a thought-provoking idea. Are we all hiding in our own undergrounds, afraid to face the world authentically? Are we like the underground man, clinging to our suffering because it's the only thing that makes us feel real?
And let's not forget Apollon, the underground man's long-suffering servant.
Oh, yeah.
He provides a stark contrast to the underground man's neurotic tendencies.
Ah, Apollon. He's a fascinating character in his own right. He's stoic, practical, seemingly unfazed by his master's constant outbursts. He represents a kind of normalcy that the underground man both despises and envies.
Right. He hates Apollon's lisp, his slow, deliberate movements, even the way he reads songs in the evening.
Right.
It's as if he needs this constant source of irritation to fuel his own sense of superiority.
But beneath the surface, I think there's a sense of longing. Apollon represents a simple, grounded existence that the underground man craves but can never attain. He's too trapped in his own intellectual labyrinth to experience the world in such a direct, unmediated way.
And there's that scene where he tries to humiliate Apollon by withholding his wages.
Yeah.
Again, a desperate attempt to exert control.
To feel some sense of power over someone.
Right.
Of course, it backfires spectacularly. Apollon sees right through his charade, and Liza walks in at the most awkward possible moment, further exposing his pettiness.
Right. And then we come to the underground man's final confession, where he admits that even in his most intimate moments with Liza, he was driven by spite.
Wow.
By a need to dominate and possess.
This confession is both disturbing and illuminating. He acknowledges his own twisted psychology, his inability to love in a healthy way.
Yeah.
He equates love with tyranny,
Right.
with proving his own moral superiority.
He even admits to feeling a sense of mastery and possession when he realized Liza loved him. It's a chilling admission that leaves us questioning whether he's capable of any genuine emotional growth.
It's a bleak outlook, but this is the underground right. Dostoevsky isn't offering us easy answers or feel-good resolutions. He's forcing us to confront the darkness within ourselves, the underground aspects of our nature that we often try to hide.
So we're left with this deeply flawed, painfully self-aware, and ultimately quite tragic character.
Yeah.
What are we supposed to make of him? Is the underground man's story a cautionary tale? A warning about the dangers of overthinking and self-sabotage?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? He's clearly miserable, and we see how his over-acute consciousness leads him to make some terrible choices. But he's also incredibly insightful,
Right.
forcing us to confront those uncomfortable truths about human nature that we often prefer to ignore.
It's like he's holding up this distorted mirror to our own psyches, reflecting back all the pettiness, despite the self-deception we try to hide even from ourselves. He takes these tendencies to the extreme.
Right.
But isn't there a little bit of the underground man in all of us?
Oh, absolutely. Remember that part where he talks about clinging to suffering because it somehow feels more real, more authentic than happiness?
Right.
It's a disturbing thought.
Yeah.
But it resonates, doesn't it? Think about how often we justify our bad decisions, convince ourselves we're right, even when we know deep down we're not.
It's that stubborn, self-destructive part of us that wants to be right, even if it means being miserable. The underground man might be an extreme case, but he taps into something universal about the human condition.
Dostoevsky's brilliance lies in his ability to create characters who are both deeply flawed and undeniably human. He doesn't offer easy answers or moral judgments. He simply presents us with the underground man in all his complexity and asks us to grapple with the implications.
So what do we do with this knowledge? How do we avoid becoming trapped in our own underground, consumed by negativity and self-doubt?
Well, I don't think there are any simple solutions. But maybe that's the point. Perhaps the first step is simply acknowledging those darker impulses within ourselves, the underground aspects of our nature we'd rather not confront.
Right. Facing those shadows, recognizing our own capacity for pettiness and self-deception. That's got to be a starting point, right?
Right.
But where do we go from there?
Maybe it's about making conscious choices. Choices that move us away from that cycle of suffering and self-sabotage that the underground man is so trapped in. It's about finding ways to connect authentically with others, to embrace vulnerability, and maybe to allow ourselves to experience a little joy without feeling the need to overanalyze it.
It's a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
But Notes from Underground isn't about offering a step-by-step guide to self-improvement. It's about provoking us,
Yeah.
challenging us to examine our own lives and the choices we make. It's about making us think, really think about what it means to be human.
And that's what makes this book so enduring, so relevant even today. It's not a comfortable read, but it's an important one. It pushes us to confront the complexities of human nature, to look beyond the surface and grapple with the messy, contradictory reality of what it means to be alive.
So if you're ready for a deep dive into the darker recesses of the human psyche, I highly recommend giving Notes from Underground a read. It's a challenging, thought-provoking, and ultimately unforgettable journey. You might be surprised by what you discover about yourself along the way.